It's a way of scaling intent beyond what I can do myself.
Okay.
And so I look at it as a way of finding other creative people who have not just alignment, but already are taking action on that direction and asking if they need fuel. Now you're all self-conscious.
No, I'm self-conscious. Welcome to New Forms. I'm Sander Fractures. My guest today is CY.Lee. One of the first questions I'm asking people on every interview, I've realized, is how do you describe yourself to other people?
Okay, that's excellent.
Yeah. So how do you describe yourself?
Well, it really depends on the audience.
Yeah.
I will start from the most awkward thing,
Mm-hmm.
which is amongst my peers. I would describe myself as I've kind of like finished up my loop in corporate tech, and now I'm doing my own thing, and I just leave it at that. I think amongst people who are in music tech or in music in general, I've been workshopping the idea of just calling myself an executive producer.
Okay.
And I feel like that is concise.
Mhm.
So it's not a non-answer, but it also leaves plenty of wiggle room to then explain it based on what questions they ask.
Right. So, I guess we met through music in a way, right?
Yes.
Like through music communities around technology. And since that time, I've known you as like a supporter of creative work.
Yeah.
Or creators. How did that start?
I would draw it all the way back to my background in music and technology, both of which were strong elements of my childhood and upbringing all the way through undergraduate at college. I played the cello. I had a deep interest in personal computers, wrote software for a museum of science as a high school student. And then I went to MIT, where I studied initially computer science, but ultimately architecture, because that was so much more interesting.
Architecture in
Of buildings. But
buildings.
generally speaking, I think architecture, there's a very directed study of architecture where, yes, you get licensed and you become like qualified to build things that people would spend time in that don't collapse upon them, and also make them feel like a human within a space that is designed and where they feel at home.
Right.
But I feel like that in itself is the purest of design disciplines, where you're designing things for other people. So in that sense, architecture is a combination of empathy and design and engineering.
Right.
And so I saw it maybe not so crisply as that back then. I saw it a bit of as like an escape from the rigidity and the theoretical sort of obsession with which the discipline was taught at MIT.
Okay.
And sort of like carried my interest into like an undergraduate architecture program, which everyone sort of knows is actually a useless degree, because you have to still go get a master's before you can actually start down the road to practicing. It's like having a biology degree, wanting to become a doctor, but then it's like, oh, you have to go to medical school and then become an intern and a resident, and then it's 20 years later. I exaggerate. But in a sense, like the feeling I wanted to reach was where I could find interesting problems and then try to solve them.
So when you, what was like the first instance that I guess you either realized you could support something, chose to support something? Like, what was those first, I think like getting over the hump of doing something like that for the first time is interesting to me. So like, do you remember kind of like those, or, broadly those first relationships where you're like, I want to get involved in either helping make this thing happen or support this person? Like, what were those first kind of like forays into like supporting things?
I feel like it didn't seem like something that I wanted to do of my own volition until I went on the path of, I was going to say remodeling my house, but actually that's not accurate. This is actually a challenging problem, because I know that I had felt this in various forms before it became obvious, like, oh, this is patronage.
Yeah.
And this totally makes sense because I see how this has been modeled out over time in many different instances.
Right.
Um, yeah, honestly, there's not one moment where it just suddenly made sense. It was more of like in retrospect, I realized that I felt good about paying someone to do something that they were going to do already.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, it was where people were actively asking for that.
Right.
And I feel like that was like more part of like fundraising
Okay.
in the sense of like like someone knocks on your door and they're like, hey, we're trying to raise money to, send our class to this championship or something like that. And it was not like I've been around that all through my sort of like middle school, high school, and adult life.
Mm.
But having someone propose that as like, I have a creative endeavor I want to partake of, and I need someone to help me finance this so it could actually happen. Like that sort of happened in retrospect after doing it a few times where I didn't think of it that way.
Right.
Uh, and so, yeah, it's sort of like doing something and then accidentally discovering that's patronage.
Right.
So I can't pinpoint it, but it's like the accumulation of a whole bunch of different experiences around patronage till I realized I could do this very deliberately.
And at that, and I guess that's the point where you start thinking about different language, right? Like you were
Yes.
talking about the executive producer thing that you mentioned earlier. So given that it kind of started in this quite like fluid way, you have ended up at a point in time where this has become like a big part of your life and a big part of what you do as a person, right?
Yeah.
Like how you define yourself.
Yes.
What's your current mental model for like what patronage is to you?
It's a way of scaling intent beyond what I can do myself.
Okay.
And so I look at it as a way of finding other creative people who have not just alignment, but already are taking action on that direction and asking if they need fuel.
Right.
And better yet, when people realize that, have a way of asking me if I have fuel.
Right.
Because ultimately what I want to accomplish is to have this sort of like decentralized forward movement in ideas, in things I believe in,
Right.
which they also believe in, and then we kind of like move in correspondence with each other, in a sort of a light affiliation or alliance. And where I can't multiply myself into various people who are doing the hard, like literal work, I have resources by which I can help other people who are already similarly motivated to do the work they want to do.
And so I guess I think that the assumption is there is a singular output, right? Which depending on the project may be the case, right? Like a movie, a film, a documentary may have a more clear endpoint. But I guess what I would be interested to hear about is what is the network of things that feel like success to you? I'd imagine there's multiple things.
Yeah.
And maybe success isn't the right word, but like the reason I do this. Like what are the kind of different things that can happen where you come out of this feeling like this is worthwhile, this makes sense?
It's very open-ended. I don't have a hard definition. Right now, it's very much a feeling and intuition. And it's interesting to be asked this question because I haven't thought so deeply about it that I have a crisp answer other than it feels aligned.
Okay.
And so some things I feel aligned around are like storytelling that crosses generations.
Right.
Like a younger generation expressing curiosity in an older generation, and then trying to both tease out the stories and then understand them in a way and share them with people such that that wisdom carries across.
Right. Like the creation of knowledge through creation, right? They're creating things.
It's more like the trends. I think there's an illusion amongst people who sort of like think about parenthood as I can really take all my learnings from my upbringing and imbue them upon my offspring in a way where they can just move so much faster. Whether it's parenting, but I think, it also spreads to people who teach. A lot of the motivations I feel are like, I'd love to find people who are sort of similar mind to where I started, and I'd like to give them that extra oomph that'll get them effective or like whatever the spirit of it is, but
Yeah.
get them there faster
Mhm.
so I can, so they can do great things.
What are some of the examples of the great things, so that people could understand? I mean,
Yeah.
having spoken, I know there's a range of things, but like, if you could give some examples of what, some of the extremes of what those range of things can be, that would be interesting to hear about.
Yeah. I feel like, well, it just to sort of like make it a little more crisp, what I think there's fundamentally when one learns to become great at something they realize they're good at,
Mm-hmm.
it involves a lot of thrashing around.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about this later probably, but a lot of that is just like the process of trying to do things in a mediocre way leads to mastery and taste
Mm-hmm.
that allows you to, the individual to then have a strong point of view in something where they can then
Right. Yeah.
do something that's really significant because they've kind of come to this point where they have a strong feeling about what they want to make that will make people feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
And so, in the abstract, that just like mostly corresponds to storytelling.
But I guess like what people turn to straight away is like, we have this model for like an executive producer or a patron, and in that traditional sense, people think of like a body of work, like a collection. We see it in movies as a movie.
Mm-hmm.
We see like we see plaques on the walls, right? We see like this building was funded by.
Right.
We went around some places yesterday that had like a plaque that was this was paid, the art university was paid for by an endowment by this person.
Right.
And so on both sides, we see kind of like examples. And in your case, that has ranged from what, like albums to documentaries to like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what other people see as the output, right? Like your internalization of what that output is more interesting perhaps. But I think for people to understand what you're actually doing, what's actually happening in this period of time where these relationships are going on,
right.
There are things happening that quite often people come to you with where like, I believe strongly in this thing that I would like to achieve.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's usually, I believe in this story that I want to tell.
Yeah.
And whether that story is in the form of like music or film
Mhm.
or software, those things are, in some sense, a belief that they hold dear.
Right.
And I think those things are rare. And I think they're important because they inspire other people to find beliefs that they hold dear and then share them with others. This is sort of the fabric of how humans relate to each other.
Yes.
And so when I encounter kind of like these sort of convictions and desire to build something that is really pushing themselves and also pushing an edge of like an area where stories aren't being told, or there's some impracticality about it where it doesn't fit a commercial model for the most part. But it is something which has importance both to the person who's creating it and to some community that either they know very explicitly or have a good sense of. I mean, that's where I feel like I have the desire to sort of help them make that thing happen.
And when does what are like, what are some moments that feel like it's working? Does it feel like it's working when it's proliferating, it's growing, there's more things? Is it like
those would be easy ways of telling that it's working, where
Yes.
The impact becomes like the thing blows up
Yeah.
and it receives some level of adulation in the ways we're used to judging something's success.
Yeah.
But I've over time come to appreciate that a lot of making great things requires making a lot of good things, which also requires making a lot of like half-assed crappy things.
Yes.
And so in that sense, I factor that into like sometimes the success is that they decide that it's worth making a V2
Right.
or V3 or V1.1.
Having time to iterate, but also having time to fall, right? Having time to experiment or space to try.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because the vision is like actually in some sense once you have that's maybe the easy part of getting to the next start line, which is the real start line of like let's trying to make the thing.
Yes. Which I guess that makes me think a lot about like what is often most interesting to me about like your relationships with creatives is like the thing that it allows that the current systems don't allow time for, right? Which you see in art, right? Like this person has commissioned a body of work or artist residencies where they go for a year and live in a place, and their focus is to have time to create,
Yeah.
right? And that creation might happen in the first week, or it might happen after 6 months.
Right.
But the presumption or the hope is that they have time to do the thing properly, right? Like, or the
Right.
space to like absorb the world, interpret it, build, format, whatever it might be.
Right.
And often it feels like some of the things that I hear about you working on is that given the impact of social media, given the impact, maybe just the pressure the artists put on each other, or on themselves, but maybe also just the pressure of life, right? That allows for time, right? And maybe for...
I don't think of it specifically as like buying time. I think residencies very much focus on, hey, we're allowing you, we're carving this time and place out, which separates you from stuff that you might think holds you back.
Yeah.
And, with that resource,
yeah,
hopefully you can do something really great.
right.
I think and maybe this is nuanced. I feel like I don't think about time in that sense, or isolation. I think about that's on the artist to figure out what they need in order to exercise their process, whatever that might be.
Right.
So if they feel like they need to carve out time to get away and maybe isolate themselves for a while, that would be something that they would say, okay, this is factored into the grant I need to make this happen. But I'm not prescriptive at all. I'd rather not be, because like the artists I work with, I feel like have hit a level of maturity in their art, their practices, where they have a good sense of what they need.
Right.
And this is, I think, what my iteration around experiments around patronage are trying to get to, which is what is a sweet spot where a patron and an artist can have a great relationship that's built around the creative process, and not so much around like, what are you going to make at the end?
Yeah. Okay. So over this period of time, you've kind of worked on these models, but you've also reached a point in time where, like, what does this thing, I guess you've been thinking about it, but other people think about what does this thing look like beyond you?
Yeah.
And you've used the word, the language of talking about wanting to start like a movement. Like, what does that look like? And what does that thing look like? So I guess, like, what does that look like? I'm like, at this moment, what is your kind of take on what type of people might be part of this movement?
Right. I see it as people who have conviction in what they want to make, and people who have conviction that they want to make positive change in the world and have economic resources.
Yeah.
And
your interest lies in culture more than other areas, specifically, like you
culture
personally.
For me is where I feel strongly.
Yeah.
But it could be really for anything. I think in the abstract, if I zoom out for a moment, I'll come back to culture. Between the two parties I described earlier, there currently isn't a way to have that dialogue.
Right.
Right. Someone has to stick their neck out. Either the artist has to ask, or the patron has to offer.
Right.
And I'm not saying there should be a marketplace, but there should be at least a convention.
Okay. Yeah.
And to me, that is what is necessary to kind of like modulate how, people who make and people who consume relate to each other, such that there's room for these conversations to start.
Yeah.
And once those conversations can start, then there's kind of a structure a ladder they can climb, or stairs they can climb, to sort of understand, hey, what patronage can mean something as simple as Bandcamp or Patreon, but that's like $1, $5, $10 patronage.
Yeah.
Real, like, let's do something big patronage is probably 3 or 4 or 5 digit numbers.
Yes.
And I feel like that's when it starts to make a huge difference in what's possible.
Right. And are there more projects now where you would like to be one of more than one patron? The models that you have kind of is a traditional in the sense of like the ones that I've seen you involved in mostly so far, if I'm not wrong, is like it's you having a patron relationship with an artist for a period of time or a project.
Yeah.
And looking forward, do you see you being one of more?
I would love that.
Yeah.
I feel like if there is a way for an artist to have multiple patrons, it creates more of a sense of alliance, and it
Okay, yeah.
further decentralizes the idea of like independent fans supporting independent artists.
Right.
Uh, I, I I don't think having an exclusive patron is actually a good thing, because it's then all your
You're
funding
all
eggs are
tied in.
potentially in one basket,
Mhm.
and also it can unintentionally turn into a work for hire.
Yeah.
Because if the artist really doesn't have strong conviction in what they want to make, and if the patron's not like fully aligned, then I think it's easy to end up in a situation where the artist asks the patron what they want,
Right.
and that's not what this is about at all.
hmm So, what does what does a modern creator look like to you? Like,
Hmm.
I know you work with lots of different types of people, but I often see I see like lines drawn between them, like common threads,
Yeah,
even though they work in different fields, different art forms, and different styles, and different genres, and different parts of
yeah.
the world. Um, like, in your experience of the type of people you work with, what does a modern creator look like for you?
The creator I'm most interested in,
Yeah.
and one could call this a modern creator, is one who is agnostic across media. So people who maybe think of themselves as maybe a musical artist, but for whom they're not constrained,
Mhm.
but they don't see themselves solely as a musician.
Right.
And I think what really kind of there's two things I think that really influence the way I think about this. One is my time in the media lab at MIT, where I saw a lot of very creative people
Yeah.
without sort of like being stuck in a media type, playing with a lot of nascent technology.
Right.
And we all saw this again in Web3, where all these different artists who are doing digital work found room in their brains to also play around with this new media type called NFTs.
Right. Yeah.
And the ones that went in hard to really try to see what was possible, I feel like that is the type of creator I'm deeply interested in, because
Right.
it is working with the development of technology as part of the media.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a cultural reaction, and really with the intent of like harnessing what's possible with technology that is
Right.
not driven by a baser need, like
Yes.
a platform's need to perpetuate its existence. And maybe that's to put a sharp point on it. I feel like independent patronage, is a great alternate universe that can sit very nicely aside the kind of inherent role that technologically based platforms play
Right.
in offering creative people an opportunity to play with this tech
Right.
and to make things.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, those things that they make have to serve the platform,
Right.
because that's the nature of the platform.
Yes.
Whereas if independent people are funding independent experimentations with new technologies,
hmm
maybe they end up building the same thing a platform would, but maybe they also build something completely different,
Right.
and
Yeah.
which inspires other people to push envelopes in far different sets of
Yeah.
directions.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you're saying that, it's making me think about a long time ago we talked about how like mediums and creators that come out of mediums, right? The YouTuber, and we joked at the time about the big, someone being a TikToker, right?
Right.
And someone being an NFTer, right?
Yep.
As like a kind of fun way to play with what that means. But I know that you've been working on a platform. Well, you've been a patron of a platform called In Process with an artist called Latasha.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're speaking about that, my question was going to be, tell me about that. Tell me about the process of documentation and how it plays a part in recording process, which we'll get to. But it also made me think about how the relationships that are created through this kind of like patronage model almost require it to have that work backwards, right? In that like the platform is like a new medium of platform that is needed to recognize this thing that's happening, right? Like, which is that there isn't a visible representation of like the work and process that comes out of these things, right?
Right.
And that through that there has been I mean, maybe that's a good point to start to explain In Process.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that, it's almost like that platform needs to exist, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a part of our culture that I saw kind of like enter the popular view of, you know, when I think, well, if I rewind a bit, during the era of DVDs,
hmm
there came a point where you could start getting like deluxe editions of things that included bonus content, and the bonus content often included the making of, the story behind the story. So
Sure.
like I think of it as the meta story.
Yeah.
And I feel like often that was the most fascinating things that people who were obsessed about those movies would want to get and see,
Yeah.
because it helped them better, not just understand, but feel more closely connected
Yes.
to the content that they love, the
Sure.
story that was being told
Yeah,
and
yeah.
whatnot. And so that was always kind of made as an afterthought, it felt like, or certainly was on a different timeline where it was only made sense when told after the fact.
Yes.
And I feel like that, over time, as sort of the cycle of the delay between something happening and when it was visible, kind of like compacted down with the advent of like internet, of cell phones, all these other sort of technologies. We no longer need to have a wrap up of like how this is made, when in fact that story could be told like in process.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so that sort of brings us to where the barriers have now disappeared to, the people who have that curiosity about the thing that's being made, or the people who are making it, they can witness that and be a part of seeing it develop, all the messiness of it, because I think people like messiness.
Sure. Yeah.
But at the same time also have it as a way to stay connected and attached to the thing that's being made.
Right.
And that to me is like this huge opportunity, where as individuals we see ways to connect ourselves with something happening, as part of the part of being a fan of something.
Right. And so because of that, the documentation of process has become like a really important thing for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a feeling you get out of like watching a really great story.
Sure.
There's also a feeling you get out of being part or witness of something that you think is really interesting.
Yeah.
And that in process, like seeing a thing in process, is, I think, speaks to that feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
Next question. Do you see examples? I mean, you said to me that you like to work on things that you feel would be happening anyway. But do you see examples of work that's happening that you feel like this relationship allows to happen to a greater extent that wouldn't otherwise? Have there been like certain projects where you felt like it's been like rewarding or exciting for you to watch the artist like build or create something that this relationship may uniquely have allowed to happen?
I probably, I feel like there's the what I say about, like I want to be a patron of things that were going to happen anyway,
Yeah.
Is a very optimistic view.
Yes.
And I don't think that's always going to be the case. I think there's some things which are relative no-brainers to be like, oh, I want to put capital into that because this is really exciting.
And the expectations you set on those projects are what?
It varies depending on the scale and of the project. If it's one person trying to do something they've never done before, I just want to see it happen.
Yeah, or at least see them try. Is that something that fits in?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's things I think that can really change the way like a community might see something.
Right.
Like a great documentary movie about a certain sort of story that has not been shared broadly amongst a certain community.
Right.
Might serve that. And I haven't done enough of these to have, I think, specific criteria. Like as I kind of mentioned earlier, a lot of this is done based on intuition and instinct
feeling
right
what
now.
feels right and what feels interesting.
And I feel like the more I do it, the more it'll become crisp the way I can describe it to other people, where they can see how they might feel that way about something that they've seen.
And how does it differ to something like Patreon for you? I know that you kind of have some thoughts on this, but what is when you look at that model, what are the differences, or why doesn't that Patreon model for you personally feel like the vehicle for you to approach artists?
I mean, for Patreon, I think is a great way of building patronage as a step up from things that people already understand as subscription and episodic content.
Right. Yeah.
And so no shade to them,
Yeah.
but it's very much a, you know, Mickey Mouse amount of support that
Mhm.
each creator. And maybe if that particular artist can accumulate a ginormous audience, they
Yeah.
can make a good living doing that, or
Mhm.
they can support work doing that. But trying to align, 100 or 1,000 subscribers
Yes.
is much, I think, a different kind of lift than
Yeah.
a person who has a very specific idea where, in the angel investment world for a startup,
Yeah.
you just need a couple of initial angel investors. You don't want
Right.
to find 1,000 angel investors.
Right. And the expectation is not that you produce content on the terms of that angel investor, right? That doesn't suit the purpose of the goals. And I mean, when I say that, I mean that with Patreon and some of those things, they inherently fall into like almost like a service, which is like I
Yeah,
do this thing every week for you, like a performative service, and they're
yeah. I would say Patreon is more of a OnlyFans type model
right,
than what I think I'm trying to do,
right,
than executive producing.
okay, fair enough. Um, I guess one of the last questions I was going to ask you is one of the more complicated ones, but the question that everyone wants to ask is the why, right? And I think like I think about that why in terms of when I'm applying for funding grants and things, which is often the question of like why they ask why now,
Right.
and what they mean is why not, will this be the end of this if we just gave you the money next year?
Yeah.
Or would this be the end of this if we gave it to you next week? Because really we need to choose the one that needs that money right now in this moment, right?
Right.
So, and I think so I guess the question is like, for you, like, why now, right? Like, why not sit on whatever funds that you have, or why not put those things elsewhere? Like, why now in your life? And yeah, why?
I think the simple answer to that is right now, this seems very exciting to me
Right.
because of my connection to culture, because of, the people whose work
Mhm.
I admire
Yeah.
are all in plain view.
Yeah.
I think for each individual, like someone coming out of, like maybe they've just raised a bunch of kids, they've just gone off to college, and now there's finally time to think.
Mhm.
And maybe that person is also like a little out of touch with what art scene is going around them that they might care about.
Yeah.
Um, there's a level of passion I think I've achieved where it's just obvious to me that I should be making things happen.
Right.
And I believe a lot of people can end up there. I
Cool.
mean, the trite
Yeah.
comparison is like, everyone at some point has a midlife crisis if they are lucky enough to live that long.
Yeah.
Some people will see that as this unique opportunity to become more of their true self, really lean
Sure.
into figuring out what is their next act.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with that Christmas, move with great force. Other people, maybe it's not a big deal. And I don't think so. So I don't think there's a why now that I've ever asked myself.
Right.
It is, I think, a position I found myself in.
Yeah.
And I think for other people, what I would love them to see is when they are also in a similar position and realize that's an option for them to take,
Right.
or a direction to pursue.
And those rely, but I think those things rely on the things that other normal people are going through, right? I'm presuming you're thinking about like what your family needs, what your family are going to need like later in life, what you're going to
Right.
need later in life. There is like a series of things happening
Yeah.
that all people who are lucky enough to have like some capital or some form of comfortability are going through, right?
Yeah.
I think like in the abstract at times that the assumption is that you're like I don't know, you're completely different to everyone else, right? There
Mhm.
is something different happening here, but you are making decisions based on those similar things, right? That you have made a decision that
Yeah.
there
So,
is an amount of support that I will need for myself, there's an amount of support that my family will need for themselves, and there is something else here,
right.
right? And some people's decision is just to for want of a better word, take that to the grave, right?
Yeah.
Or spin it into more money, right?
Right.
Just to keep going forever and ever and ever.
Yep.
There is no end point because always more money can be made, right?
Right.
So and for you that's not the case, or you're, without being too personal, you have like multiple things going on, right? I would imagine.
Yeah. I think in a philosophical sense, there comes a point where you realize that the resource I have the least of is time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it that I want to do with that time
Sure.
that has the most meaning to me? And yes, that is thinking selfishly, but balanced within, all the other responsibilities and commitments I feel I have.
Yeah.
I want to, or I've been able to deliberately parcel things out such that I have a certain degree of freedom in, I mean, one could be trite and say, I've taken on this hobby of patronage,
Yes.
and it lives within these constraints.
Yeah.
And it's very satisfying to me to have this thing. It's not this sort of like unbounded new role I've created.
Right.
But it's the same way of like taking the word like corporate job, perhaps, and replaced it with executive producer.
Mm-hmm.
It is it's a series of containers.
Yeah.
That I've swapped around that make sense to me now.
Right.
Like going forward with the time I have left.
Yeah.
And I don't expect everyone to sort of like think about their life in terms of the various Legos that make up their time and make up their resources
Sure.
and their responsibilities and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. But I think it's really useful to have stories of that structure that other people can, when they see it, see themselves in a way where they're like, oh, I can start from that.
Right.
And start thinking about
Yeah,
their
yeah.
time differently. Like, so the example you bring up, like, it's very easy for someone who's made money trading things
Yes.
to keep doing that till they die, because it's very satisfying to see a number go up.
Sure. And they can sit at home and check the thing every day or every
Right.
week. And
Yeah. And maybe that's part of their identity. It's like, I make numbers go up.
Right.
And
Yes.
lovely. That's great. And for some people, that's their ideal sort of like state until they die.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But for other people, like, they might look for other meaning, whether it's
Mhm.
spiritual or cultural or whatnot.
Right.
And I think there's this the House of Paper. I wouldn't call it a platform. The House of Paper effort that I'm a patron of seeks to sort of build structures by which people who find themselves in these conditions can have a concrete example by which to imagine, oh, here's a way I can participate in culture
Right. Yeah.
using capital that I have.
Which used to be the norm, much more the norm a long time ago. Right. And that's the
Amongst
that's
the
the-
certain demographic,
Yes.
yeah.
A certain demographic.
Right.
That,
So you think about the barons of industry from
And-
like the late 1800s,
Right.
or royalty.
Yeah.
Or, it's like, what are the nice things we can do other than sit on all this land or all these
Yes.
factories or whatever it is that's just generating money.
Mhm.
So it is really, in some sense, it's like the simple way of talking about it is create a product that helps people see how they can make meaning with their capital,
Right.
where they can feel good about it,
Yeah.
and feel like they're helping their communities in a way that's constructive.
Yes. And a set of norms and language to use that help that proliferate more. Right.
Right.
Like I know lots of people who love music and their house is full of records, and they used to be in a band, or they used to DJ, or they used to run a label, who are affluent and successful.
Right.
And a lot of the time I am thinking, like, would you ever want to impact that? Right? Because you're telling me
Yeah.
this, I'm being told the story about how clubs are closing and how artists don't have any time, or there's no great albums anymore by
Right.
those people often, right? Because they're
Right.
passionate about those things.
Right.
But there isn't really like a framework or a language or an example for that thing to click and be like, well, maybe and maybe that thing is just like putting a few £100 into a local community church to run some music events, or
Yeah.
it could be a multitude of things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think it just comes back to like there's formats people understand. So if people
Right.
understand, a community center where parties are thrown, what can I do to keep that running?
Yes.
There's like that community center could make an ask of a wealthy person and
Mhm.
say, hey, we need another, $10,000 over this period of time to keep things running and to program it in
Yeah.
a really, really great way. If those conversations happen on the regular, and there's people who can give that scope of money,
Yeah.
that's great. But I think what I'm pushing towards is as people come up with other ideas, that the people with that capital, maybe they've helped run a couple of venues or like finance a couple of venues. They also see there's other opportunities to do experiments such that maybe the community isn't just the people in the neighborhood. Maybe it's all the people around the world who love this weird form of this art.
Right, and could benefit from examples of things happening that you could learn from, or new models or new ideas as well, right?
Right. Yeah. So it really comes back to, I care a lot about research and development around new mediums based on where technology is going and how people's attention is
Right.
being directed, and so on and so forth.
Okay, yeah.
As opposed to saying like, okay, well, like here's a bunch of answers of like what people who have money could do to be patrons of the arts.
Right.
Like the symphony, the community center,
Right.
buying instrument for kids in educational programs. Like,
Right.
yes, those are all great answers. but those are also completely ignoring the landscape that we are all
Right,
know
that's
is
shifting and changing, right? Yeah,
Right.
and then in that lies a connection between a lot of the things that you're interested in, right?
Yeah.
Which seems to be that things are shifting. We see other people talk about it, like Martin Warov has both spoken to us about a lot about research and development, and that idea of how that takes place in other industries, and
Yeah.
you have too. And not in the arts very often. And maybe because technology hasn't had the same role as it does, right? But specifically with music, right, there is very little investment in new ideas. And
Yeah.
especially like new ideas from the creators on the ground doing the work, right? Rather than a creative agency, a head of technology at a label, right?
Right.
Like who are these, who are the new pioneers, for example, or
Right. And by
experimenters?
definition, I think those people are completely unable to be pioneers
Yeah.
because the structures they work within
Yeah.
are staked deeply in the way things are now.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is reactive as opposed to looking at what is possible.
Right.
And then building prototypes.
Yeah. And you're hoping to allow that to happen.
I'm trying to be, an inspiring force
Yes.
that opens up people's ideas to being, free with their capital to efforts that are, in the process of figuring out what is possible.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure as always. Thanks so much, man. Cool.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.